spending a bunch of time in prison. They don't have golf courses in prison.
We didn't even hold clubs. We talked about rules. We talked about ethics. I can't believe you just broke the rules in front of the cop.
There's just something different about golf that requires you as the individual to be in tune and focused, you know? Man, I was blown away by what you were able to pull off there.
You interact with people with dignity and respect. Let them know they have meaning. Build a rapport with them. Their tone, their stress goes down. Your tone, your stress goes down. The tone of the facility goes down.
All right, well, hey, welcome to another episode of Cops and Convicts Golf. Super thankful to be able to do a brand new style of video for us, for sure, because typically we're doing an intro on the first tee box. And so this time we're doing it a little bit different. And we have a special guest with us, Mr. Tim Thrasher. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We're grateful for you to be here. It's kind of funny how this all came about.
Yeah, we had some communication early on, and it kind of fizzled out. And then, as luck would have it, somebody that Tim works with and a personal friend of mine connected us, and we were able to make this happen. So it's for a good cause, and I'm excited to hear more about Tim's program.
Yeah, so Tim, you come to us as a new transplant here to Oregon from our up to the north partner in Washington. And so what was it that you were doing in Washington that sparked both mine and Rodney's interest?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It is kind of cool how this came together. But I was working for Department of Corrections in Washington. I'm always looking for a way to contribute on my own time, obviously, as well as when I'm working. But just something to give back. And I had always said if I ever had the chance to start a golf program at a facility, I would do it. And so about 4 years ago now, I got a chance when I became a superintendent. And, I talked to some of the staff and I gauged the interest and decided I was going to try it out and see how it would go.
Which I think is pretty crazy, right? As obviously the convict in the group, spending a bunch of time in prison. They don't have golf courses in prison, let alone would most, I guess depending on the facility, but most superintendents or officers would not have a strong desire to put ultimately a possibility of a weapon in, for sure not in my hands when I was in the joint, but the sport as a whole, there's just something to golf in general that I think is amazing if you're willing to give it a shot. But to be able to do that in an institution, so as the superintendent being willing to take that risk, right? I mean, obviously you have to have the right guys, but what made you think that, like, okay, I think that this could work?
Well, I mean, first of all, we were at a minimum facility, so lowest custody level, right? So more privileges, more responsibilities, more opportunities. And
guys
so,
shorter to the gate.
6 years or less to the gate, things to lose, lots to gain. And so the setting was certainly about as good as it was going to get for that opportunity. Facility out in the middle of the forest, lots of land to do things, hit balls and things like that. And we take calculated risk all the time. And so, the fact that I was present all the time, every moment that they were doing this stuff, literally every moment that these classes and programmings was occurring, along with some of my other staff, it was well worth doing. And so, that was kind of the catalyst. And I did a lot of work and research to try, and I didn't want to recreate the wheel, but literally there was nothing online anywhere on how do you do this. So we just went and we figured it out along the way.
So obviously you love the game of golf. What was it that made you think that golf would be such a good tool or conduit to these inmates to help them maybe succeed or to help their rehabilitation process?
Yeah, I mean, on other things, I tell people all the time what golf does for me physically, mentally, and some people laugh when I say even spiritually, but it's kind of true. I mean, this is out here doing this is probably about as at peace as I get, right? And so, the opportunity to kind of share that with folks. But when I started it, it was not about golf in general. It wasn't. This was my way to give back, but also all the byproducts of golf, the ethics, the rules, idleness reduction. Maybe somebody picks up a new hobby along the way. The flyer I put out had all the reasons you should play golf. That I put it in the living units to kind of let people know what was going on. The incarcerated. You can play it with your family. It's healthy. People that golf, on average, live 5 years longer, which I read that a few places online. The rules of golf are the rules of life. All these things, and that's what I put out, and that's what people bid on. So, golf was just the vehicle to do it, but there were many more other alternative reasons for wanting to go in that direction.
Yeah, and I can see where that would be, like, as I think about it, golf is, there's so much integrity involved in my profession as the cop. I mean, integrity was everything. Yeah. And let's face it, a lot of times people that were incarcerated didn't have much integrity or they wouldn't be there. And so teaching them that value, I think that's just amazing. And it's a great conduit to get these people transitioning and going in the right direction. So kudos to you for coming up with that idea.
Yep.
We can do it on the handicaps too.
I just increased my handicap to 37.
I'm a 24.
Just like 4 minutes ago. Was it good?
Yeah, you're putting for evil.
What a shot.
Wow.
You hit that branch, it helped you. What did you say it was when you shot it?
42. Good line. Really good.
Oh!
Oh!
Mr. Thrasher, that was a nice putt, sir.
I almost didn't want to putt that after watching that.
Yeah, I was really intrigued when I saw it. There's a couple of the guys that were in the video, because golf.com did a video on your program. And there's a couple of guys, and I'm tattooed from head to toe, and we don't fit the standard mold that, we're blessed to be out here at Creekside, Golf Club, which is a private club here in Salem, Oregon. And I've been, for the most part, I would say 98%, welcomed with open arms here at this club. But that's not the norm, right? And golf is such an amazing sport, and it's a challenging sport that requires focus and attention and practice if you want to get better, right? Which is also life skills, right? If you want to do things and do things well, you've got to put forth the effort and the energy to do it. And that's how you become successful in life. So there is a lot of fundamentals within the sport that, someone like me could really use as a life lesson and a life value. So there was a lot of things that, as a person that, has spent time in prison, as I was watching it, I was like, man, you're a genius. Because there's just also the other things that, we talked about a little bit, before this even, which is true, again, as a person that's done time, there's the whole aspect of prison politics, right? Like you said, most of those guys on anything outside of a minimum yard, they wouldn't talk to each other. They're not allowed, right? Which is ridiculous and dumb, and people don't understand that. But that's the life inside the walls, right? But to see the unity that comes together in that, you see that in golf, right? We get to do it all the time out here, you know, with men's league and stuff, getting paired up with different groups of guys all the time, you know. But it's how you build a network of people, right? And for the most part, typically out here on the golf course, there's a lot of business transactions. You know, people are talking about, you know, multi-million-dollar deals or future business opportunities, right? That are legal, legit, and have good promise, right? There's just so much to being out here that is beneficial. Again, as I watched that video, I was like, man, this guy's a genius. Like, how do we get this to be more of a norm? You know, I mean, other sports are great. You know, there's a lot of softball that is allowed to be played in institutions, soccer, basketball, you know, but which are all great team sports and all of those things. But again, there's just something different about golf that requires you as the individual to be in tune and focused, you know. Man, I was blown away by what you were able to pull off there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The first couple of sessions, we talked about some of those guys had never even held a club, never even thought about holding a club. The thing that intrigued them was, you know, 2 hours a week doing something, right? And so, you know, people would come in, some would say, this isn't for me, and some of them had been in from the beginning. You know, in the first couple of sessions, we didn't even hold clubs. We talked about rules, we talked about ethics. I was just like, this is not a team sport. You can't rely on Josh to pull you out when you get in a situation. This is on you. And when it feels really possible that you might be able to drop a ball because nobody's looking, don't do it, because that compromises everything that you're trying to accomplish here. And you know, it was pretty funny during when Nick from golf.com came out. He spent 3 days with me, and the first day, which you don't see in the story, is I went and picked up a guy that was on community supervision, and Nick and I and Brandon went and played 9 holes at a course. And it's during the summer, so the first hole we all hit, and then Nick goes up and he lays his ball up like winter rules. And Brandon, the guy on supervision, goes, I can't believe you just broke the rules in front of a cop. Meaning me. And Nick was like, oh, well played. Your rules and ethics piece must be really shining through on this situation, because, you know, Brandon knew you don't lay up like that you play it where it lies. And so even the most simplest things like that, I think resonate with folks, because at the end of the day, everybody wants structure. Everybody needs structure. Everybody wants a set of rules to play by. And just the other byproduct of all this is just the rapport building, right? These guys, in theory, are going to be way more interactive with staff, and staff are going to be more interactive with them. And so the byproducts of this are in a correctional setting, which is crazy to say, are limitless.
Yeah,
they really are. And you know, not everybody agrees with it. Some of the staff didn't agree with it. Some of the people in the community, I don't read comments on you know, stuff like YouTube and stuff. You know, that video that Nick did with golf.com has, I think it has well north of 600,000 views now.
When I clicked the like button this morning when I was watching it, it hit 618,000 views.
That's crazy. And most of the people I know say that 99% of the comments are good, but there's some that aren't, because people don't agree with, you know, somebody in prison shouldn't have access to something like this. I would disagree all day long. There's something special that happens when you interact with people and make sure they understand that they have meaning, whoever they are. You don't define people by 1 or 2 actions or even 10 actions, because people are always progressing and hopefully always trying to do better. Not always, but you know, if you put the work in as you can, I would hope that is the case.
there we go. Nice. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Good shot, Josh.
Good shot, Josh.
Good pull.
Decent.
Relationships, man. Relationships. I think, Rodney and I talk about it often, on film, off film. Relationships are key. They're pivotal. Like you said, like you look at inmate to staff or staff to inmate assaults. I would imagine that the ratio has drastically decreased since that program, because it breaks the us against them barrier on both sides, right? Which is an amazing thing that needs to happen. When I met Rodney, I was not, my life had changed. I was, running a program and doing stuff that I was working with law enforcement with the lead program, and Rodney treated me as a person, and most other officers in his department did. There was a few that were hesitant, and I get it. My past is my past, and that creates its own thing. But the biggest, and I've said this a million times, the biggest change in my life is because of the relationships I've had with law enforcement. My PO never gave up on me. She still contacts me to this day. We're friends, but they've been huge cheerleaders. That's not that relationship that Anna created changed my view towards law enforcement in general.
That's our mandate. I believe that's our mandate. If you're a cop, if you're a parole officer, if you're a correctional officer, if you're a superintendent, that's our job. We always have this mindset that we're always working to give people the skills or help provide skills to help build better neighbors, right? That's what we do. And my goal, my wife's, she's a superintendent at a facility here in Oregon. Her philosophy, our circle of people that we work with, that we interact with, we all have the mindset that facilities have to be places of hope and humanity. And if they're not, you're not doing something right. There's this concept that you go to prison to be punished, and you go to prison, the loss of freedom is the punishment. Once you're there, it's our job to give you the skills, the programming, the treatment to get out and hopefully be productive.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that and just kind of wait, because you had made the comment earlier or a few minutes ago about the comments online about people like, why are you letting these people have these opportunities? Well, for a large portion of the public, they think prison is a punishment. It is kind of a punishment or a consequence of your actions, but the job of, or the reality is once somebody's there, it's our job to reform them and to rehabilitate them so that they can come back into society and be contributing members.
Yep.
And you're not going to do that without the relationships, like Josh talked about, to get these people thinking differently.
Yeah.
Whether it's they're thinking unclearly from drug addiction or because they had maybe a bad upbringing, poor role models. We have to change their way of thinking to make them or help them become contributing members of society.
Yep.
And it is, like, I agree. It's job of law enforcement out on the streets. You talked over and over about Sean Bennett from Salem PD and on the things that he did for you and how he talked to you. And there's probably a few people that I did that with. But then it becomes for the corrections officers, once people are inside, to really drive home that nail and finish that.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it's not going to work for everybody, but If we can reform, a large percentage of the people, that's great.
Well, and then you have people like, not just like me, but like, another friend of yours also, and dear friend of mine, Hank Crapser, right? Like, he was probably the biggest FU to the police person I've ever met. And he's now one of the biggest law enforcement advocates, right? Like, he does what I do for a living and is constantly promoting interacting with law enforcement. Like, that's what he gets paid to do, is to build better relationships with law enforcement while working with people that, are or were just like us in some way or fashion, to make that transition and change. And it's those relationships, because our relationships with you guys has changed, and the people that know us from before look at us and they're like, what? Like, why? And then we're like, look, that old mentality, like, it's the biggest lie we all lived in for so long. They're not all bad. They're not all out to just get us, right? Like, I stopped doing drugs. Guess what? I stopped doing crime, and I haven't had any negative interactions with law enforcement since. Yeah. It's just it's an amazing concept, right? Yeah. But if you stay stuck and that's the only thing then that's, you become a product of your own environment. And then it's not until something has to come in to change that. And it's typically relationship that changes people's mindsets or understanding towards a certain population or situation or thing, right? Whatever that may be. And what a better way to also, when you look at the prison politics side of things, they're forming relationship with one another, and there's a bond, which will make them think twice, because they would rather talk amongst the way that things are supposed to take place before something pops off. And guess what? Those dudes that have a bond together, they're going to be more apt to figure it out, to reconcile a situation, than have something go haywire that then not just puts themselves in harm's way, but also the relationship that they have with you and the other officers that are, they're helping in this pro-social, proactive activity, that just as fast as you brought it in, it can go away.
Yeah, I mean, my folks knew that, we were a minimum camp, so, a lot of, if you do terrible behavior, you're leaving anyway.
Right, you're going to the hole and going back to the big yard.
But the thing they understood with me is if they provided a dirty UA or refused a UA, they were out.
Yeah.
They were just done, and they knew that. And I do believe that many of them knew that was the case, and maybe it stopped them from making some poor decisions. Right? I had it happen once, and the person came to me, apologized, said, I made a really bad decision. Will you reconsider? I said, yeah, you can come back in 90 days. And guess what? He came back in 90 days because it was that important to him.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to do something. You know what? We're gonna play it true. We're gonna play it true here.
Oh, it broke that way.
The holes don't exist today.
Oh no!
That was dead center and it broke.
It looked like it jumped me, to be honest.
I'm sorry, dude.
So did they have to apply, did the inmates have to apply to become a part of this program? And then what kind of screening process did you use with that?
It's a good question. I put the flyers out, and in prison there's a thing called a kite. It's basically a note, right? It's just a letter. And so I said, send me a kite, and then it'll be first come, first served basis. And I didn't even know how big of a group I was going to have at the time. I had no idea. So there's about over 400 men there. Within a couple of days, some of my staff were like, we're getting all these kites for this. And I'm like, good, that's good. Just keep sending them to me. So within a week, there was about a week and a half, there were about 80 kites of people wanting. And some of them were hilarious. They were like, I want to do this, but I think you're screwing with us, or whatever that looks like. And so I kind of said, okay, 15 seems like a good number, and went with a 15 number. And then it kind of felt like over time that about 12 was the right number. The only qualifier I put on it is that they had to be pro-social and they couldn't use drugs. Drugs they're prevalent in prison. Despite everything we do, they're prevalent.
Yep.
We're always trying to combat that. But just like society, they're prevalent, and they come in all kinds of different ways. So they understood if they provided a dirty UA or refused a UA, they were out of the program, and it only happened one time. So for me, I feel like that's a success. I guess the other side of it could be most people that were interested in golf maybe aren't interested in drugs. I don't know. I mean, you can make all kinds of arguments, but those were kind of, I didn't have a ton of parameters, and there was no end date. So as long as you were in, you were enjoying, you were doing good, you could stay in as long as you wanted to. And there at the point before I left, before I knew I was going to leave, I was considering having a beginner and an advanced class, just so that, the newer folks do their thing, the people with a little bit of skill get to do their thing, and kind of split that out. And I think the person that took over for me up there will hopefully get to that point.
So did you have a waiting list then? Mm-hmm. So you had your initial 15, they kind of dwindled that down to 12, and I'm guessing that was like some self-attrition.
Yep, just attrition.
And then as those spots opened up, then you'd bring people in on the waiting list based on first come, first serve.
Never had to re-announce it. Never put the flyers out again in 3 years. Never had to re-announce it. I had folks show up that said part of the reason I asked to come here is so I could be in the golf program.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced setting up this program? Was it bureaucracy, red tape? Was it finding equipment? Figuring out how it was going to all go together? What do you think as you look back on it? What was the biggest setback or hurdle you had to overcome?
That's a good question. I mean, there were a few things. Nothing was super hard to get over. Another reason I did this is, we're always trying to tie things to reentry, right? And so one of the things that I talked to everybody about in the program was, do you know how many jobs there are in the golf industry? I mean, limitless. And in my mind, I was like, okay, down the road, I can partner with a golf course and maybe grounds crew stuff, or these different things. I always had conceptually, I wanted to get folks out to a range, maybe play a couple holes, all things that I knew would be hurdles to get through once I got there, but things worth thinking about. And I went to a couple of courses, and I kind of was like, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. Are you interested? They're like, nah, we don't think our clientele here would like that. Okay, that's cool. And whatever. So we didn't do this for publicity. For a couple of years, my wife kept saying, you need to tell somebody about this. I was like, we're doing this for us, nothing else. She's like, you need to tell somebody about this. So finally, she went to our DOC's communication person and said, hey, do you know Tim's doing this out there? He's like, well, I heard a little bit, but so he said, hey, can we come out and shoot a video? And they did. And so they did a video on our internal website, lots of positive feedback. Fox News up there, Fox 13 News was interested, so they came out and did a story, so it gets a little bit more publicity. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable, mostly because I don't like the critics. I don't like being criticized. I take that personal, and I understand that comes with it. So Fox did their thing. Pacific Northwest Golf Magazine hears about it. Reach out and say, hey, we'd love to do a story. Okay, great. We'd like to do that. So they came out. Just so happens they own the home course in DuPont up there. Beautiful course. And the editor-in-chief is like, you need anything, let us know because we're on board. We want to support you. And so, I got a hold of them and was like, Nick from golf.com is coming out. We'd like to maybe play a couple holes, meet with your grounds crew staff about wage and work and qualifications. And they helped set it all up.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And they're like, no, whenever you need something, their golf pro gave our guys an hour lesson before we played on the video that you don't see in the video. Almost everybody's been impacted by incarceration. Almost everybody knows somebody, a family member, a friend, somebody that's been incarcerated. And these folks with Pacific Northwest Golf were no different. And they're like, I've been impacted. What you're doing is great. And so building those relationships in the beginning was kind of challenging, to answer your question, but after that, it really wasn't. Then Nick comes out, does his story, it comes out. The response from the community, the calls that I would get, overwhelming. 3, 4, 5 calls a day from people just saying, thank you. Can I donate? What can I donate my time? I got pros from across the country saying I'd like to come out there and spend a day with them. What can we donate? My wife's getting ready to have a program start at Coffee Creek because of volunteers in Portland that reached out that said it. I've been impacted by incarceration. I would love to help. I was a golf person. I have a golf business. Can I help? I hooked her up with my wife. So they're getting ready to start a program out at Coffee Creek. My goal is, like you said, there's value here.
100%.
And I don't know that everybody can see the forest for the trees. So anything I can do to get the word out there that there's value here. Because here's the deal. And I'm going to harp on this till I'm blue in the face. Corrections, law enforcement, corrections is an incredibly hard field. Correctional employees, the average lifespan of a correctional employee is 57 to 59 years old. That's how quick we die from the stress and all the other things that come along with that, just the environment. We know this. So when my staff the staff I worked with would say, why are you doing this? I'd say, okay, let's play this out. You interact with people with dignity and respect. Let them know they have meaning. Build a rapport with them. Their tone, their stress goes down. Your tone, your stress goes down. The tone of the facility goes down. Everybody's interacting with each other positive. There's less stress. We're going to live longer. It's not a hard concept, right? And I do believe that. I believe that 1,000,000%. I don't want to be dead when I'm 58 years old. I just don't. And so, that's the other one of these byproducts that we get out of this potentially if we do it the right way. And I'm hoping other, DOCs, other agencies pick up on this and say, well, it's at least it's worth a try.
Sure.
So that's kind of where my headspace is at.
Yeah, there's the life expectancy, and a lot of people don't realize this for people in law enforcement. I don't know what the statistics are anymore, but there's a lot of police officers or corrections officers that die within 5 years, 3 to 5 years of retirement. So luckily I'm just starting year 3, so hopefully that doesn't happen. But it's a good cause, and then it's got the other side to it. We're helping these young men or men who have however age to get better. And just in talking with you, my understanding is now you're at McLaren or Oregon Youth Authority as an investigator, and you're looking to start a similar program up at McLaren, or tell us more about that.
That's my goal. Part of when I my wife transferred to Oregon, which kind of prompted me to have to do something. So I started looking for jobs. This chief investigator spot with OYA kind of spoke to me because that was my former world. So when I interviewed and was talking to folks with the agency, I was like, I do want to come do this, but is there any way at some point I'll be able to to start this, and they were like, absolutely, we think that's great. And so I've been getting settled in over a little over 3 months now. The weather's starting to get nice. I'm jonesing for it. So we're hoping to start something with the youth out at McLaren, hopefully mid-April. And then I've got lots of staff that are interested, so my hope is maybe we're able to do something 2 or 3 nights a week based on interest and things like that. We're in the process of gauging what the interest and everything looks like, but definitely I want to work with folks to get something going. Same type of model.
And I'm guessing you're going to need equipment donated, or do you have funds set out for that, or through OIA, or do we need to get some donations? And
donations would be great. Budget's tight right now. I think everybody knows that. We just got through a short session and everything. So I've reached out to some folks that I made connections with. It's not uncommon for us to go hit the golf courses too and say, hey, can we look through your lost and found? And the expense really is with the clubs and the fake green and things like that, and it's minimal. And I always try and do it as fiscally responsible as well, just because it shows good stewardship. So we'll see what happens. More to come, but I'm excited at the prospect, and I'm hopeful that we can start to build some rapport with the staff at the facilities and some of the youth as well.
I think that's awesome, and I think it's a great opportunity to just throw it out there. If you are interested in helping support, ultimately a youth golf program, right? Because McLaren is a youth facility here in Oregon. If you're interested, man, hit us up, let us know, so we can help support. Who knows? Maybe the next Tiger Woods is sitting in jail with something different to live for.
Yeah. We didn't ask, but any of the people that started your program up in Washington, have they been released, and have you been in contact with them? Are they still involved in playing golf?
I right before I left Washington, I reached out to a couple of the folks that had been released to supervision and touched base with them, and they were doing well. I think their focus at that point is just working and being productive and making sure that they're following their pathway. But in that video, the Nick asked them all when their release dates were and everything, and my intent is when all 5 of them are out, and maybe some of the other guys too that weren't able to go on that trip, that we all get together and play at least a round. That's the goal. I have every intent to stay in touch with some of those folks and provide support, or play golf, or just if there needs to be a discussion about just what they're dealing with. I mean, that's kind of our role, right?
So meet them life on life's terms.
Yep.
Awesome.
People don't realize that they've never gone into a war. They don't know what it's like. They're guessing that we did all kinds of stuff. We took care of the country. That's what we did. We put our life on the line for the country. They come back, these people come back and help us.